I must tell you, those hurricanes in Jamaica has just been anything short of devastating. Melissa, um, it was just a fearsome Category 5 storm with winds of 185 miles per hour. It is the most powerful hurricane to strike that island in over 174 years of record keeping, and one of the strongest hurricanes ever recorded across the Atlantic. Massive power outages, with roughly 3/4 of the entire island experiencing electrical blackouts. The violent winds and heavy rains have led to extensive flooding, landslides, and the collapse of roads, bridges, and communication systems. Let me tell you, they really need your support. You know, there are a lot of people out there that will exploit this situation for their own benefit. But I hope you find reputable agencies like the Red Cross and others that can really get the relief to those coastal hospitals that are facing these dangerous storm surges up to 13 feet. You know, our very good friend Steve Laffey is in the Caribbean. Steve, wow, just devastating. Man, you got a lot of chutzpah to be out on the waters during these storms.
Well, I was near Venezuela too, and I didn't see the warships coming in or any of the drug boats. But yes, it's a terrible, terrible thing. And you think about as we came through Haiti on one side, Jamaica on the other side, 250 miles behind the storm, which is still causing so much problems. Your heart bleeds, especially I think, quite frankly, for the people in Haiti. As I go by, and I came by the island so close. Um, the GDP per capita is $2,500. They practice voodoo. They have no property rights, and it's run by gangs. And 4,000 people are dead this year just being murdered. It's just horrific to see what happens down here. And then you throw in the hurricanes, and then no one can really operate. Of course, Haiti, of course, had the earthquake in 2010, and nothing good happened from that when the money was supposedly sent and it was stolen. And that's why I'm glad you mentioned the Red Cross, and there are other reputable organizations. Yeah. But this is just a terrible situation. These people shouldn't be this poor, and we should try to find a way. And I know President Trump is focusing much more on this hemisphere, thankfully. And hopefully these things can change for these people, because everybody, there's 12 million people in Haiti who live $2,500 per capita. No property rights, can't go to court. It's a terrible situation everywhere down here. Not everywhere. Some of these that put very nice, but Venezuela is terrible.
You have to stay safe. To me, that is the biggest story right now, the well-being of the people in Jamaica and those tiny island nations. The other big political news is that the U.S.-China trade deal, they finally signed a pact, President Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. And, one of the things that's happened is, Steve, is it has de-escalated the dispute over these rare earth elements that had threatened to push the world's two largest superpowers and economies into a full-blown trade war. So what did they actually agree to, Steve?
So a number of things. And remember, not signed agreements, not treaties. And if we go back to 2019, when China did not do but 50% of what they said they were going to do, and then with the extra $200 billion that they were supposed to buy, they bought none of it. So let's not trust communist China. But basically, tariffs went from 57% to 47% on most goods, not Apple computers, unfortunately, to get them out of the country. The fentanyl products or things associated that, those tariffs went from 20 to 10. They're doing a lot to talk about, they're talking about whether NVIDIA can sell chips, the rare earth minerals that China controls 90% of the world's supply. And President Trump's trying to do things about that in our country with companies like Material MP and Lithium Association of Corporation of America, LAC. But there's a lot of little things like that. I just don't know, as we look back several days or we look forward several weeks, that it won't change again. Because Xi, the dictator of China, is clearly going to decouple from America if he can't. President Trump has made a decision not to decouple. He will let NVIDIA, and people don't know, a high-end, very high-end chip, AI chip computer company, let's say, he wants revenue when they sell those chips to communist China for the United States Treasury. But China doesn't want to buy them. Okay. So, because China wants their people to suck it up for a while, so then they will develop their own. They're doing that with AI. If you remember, they've been able to cut the cost of AI. So this is asymmetrical. And I'm afraid that if we look out another year, President Trump could be changing his mind again, because I don't think that communist China, and I think this is the lesson President Trump's finally learning about Russia, and maybe we'll learn about communist China. These dictators don't care. They will oppress their people even more. The other thing that maybe is happening is that President Trump has said that China will help us or help the Russia-Ukraine situation. I don't know how, Armstrong. I don't think it's going to happen. But clearly, this is more just talking points. If indeed rare earth minerals can be delayed, if Trump can get them to keep sending them for another year, and we go like, trying to put a man on the moon and try to get some of these things from other places, maybe we can stave off the day that Ford can't produce an F-250 truck. But that's the real danger.
But
Z is decoupling. We're trying not to now.
But the United States cut tariffs on China, which you mentioned, related to the fentanyl to 10% from 20%, which is interesting. And this reduces this overall tariff on Chinese goods to around 47%. What does that mean?
Well, at 47%, it does mean that people in the United States will find other suppliers for goods, which is really good. So if President Trump had just started with, he did start with 10, and remember President Biden took over, never went away with the 10% tariffs on communist China. But if they had just been ratcheted up on China only, in my personal belief, then U.S. people, U.S. customers, small business people, Apple Computer, they would have moved out of China already. And if we had foreseen with other presidents, all the way back to Clinton, what rare earth minerals were going to be, and everybody could have seen this, we would have had our own. But we relied on this cheap stuff from China for too long, and now we're having a problem with it. And this will hurt. Prices will go up around Christmas time for goods that don't come out of China or come with a 47% tax, 40% tariff. Not the consumer in America will pay that for the toy, let's say, or the clothing. They might pay 20% more, but prices will be higher, which leads you to the Federal Reserve and their problems. So all this is going it's a circle of problems, and we haven't really solved them because we need years to solve the problem with communist China.
How should Americans interpret the timing of the Fed's rate cut in light of the China deal announcement? How will this impact them and their economies, whether at the grocery store, whether in their homes, on their jobs? What impact will this have, if any, in the short and long run, Steve?
The short run, not much. In the long run, we have a tremendous problem with the Federal Reserve and the people who run it. Inflation now is running at 3% year over year by any measure, when their target's been 2%. President Trump rightfully said Jerome Powell should be fired, but he took the wrong tact, I think, of talking about a building. Jerome Powell should be fired with cause, because he's been says his stated goal is to keep inflation at 2%, which I disagree with. I think it should be 0%. But he's been off for 4 straight years with it much higher, at 1.9%, Armstrong. Also, they illegally bought back corporate bonds they weren't supposed to do. So the Fed is lost, and now they don't even have the data because of the government shutdown, right?
But the Fed but they're also acknowledging the downside risk, Steve, to employment. And what risk and opportunities do you feel emerge for the middle class and small business borrowers as a result?
Well, as a result, short-term rates have very little to do with small businesses, very little to do with corporations. Has something to do with your money in the bank account, whether you're getting 4% or 3% on your cash, which used to be 0 for too long. So it's very little. But what happens when they cut these short-term rates is that the inflation expectations start to rise a little bit. by investors. And so you'll last time we saw this a year ago when they began to cut rates, the mortgage rates, because they're based on 10-year Treasury notes, went from 5 to 6% roughly, just to pick a number, not down. The Fed does not control long-term interest rates. And there are many people who look at what's happening with unemployment and say the Fed is failing to realize that while President Trump has done a tremendous job of getting illegal aliens out of the country, the Fed Reserve should not, number one, even be involved in unemployment, but number two, if they are, realize that a 30,000 job increase in a month is like the old 120,000 job increase in a month. We have an older society, people aren't coming into the country, illegal aliens have left. But I don't think they see that. And that's why we saw several days ago when they cut rates, a real divergence. A Trump appointee wants short-term rates to be even 50 basis points lower. And then one didn't want to cut at all. We don't usually see that.
Let me slip this in before we say goodbye to you. Could this deal, let's say, going back to China, make U.S. exporters more competitive? And what sectors will benefit most, especially when you look at what's going on with agriculture and then tech and manufacturing? And what are the longer-term strategic risks of the U.S. relying on China for rare earth material stability while the Fed eases these rates?
The long-term risk is that China shuts the thing down completely as far as rare earth minerals again, and we shut down with our high tech, with even automobiles. So the other part is that while in the short run we'll see some higher prices, which is not inflation, that's about money. In the long run, getting away from China, from communist China, will be very beneficial to American citizens. That's just the bottom line. They're a communist country. We've had a trade deficit with them that has been so large for so long, and that people have gotten so used to cheap stuff at Walmart. I think President Trump is in the right direction, trying to get us out of this with some short-term pain. He doesn't want to cause a recession. But in the long run, we're all going to be much better off if China is not our largest importer, holding us strangled with prescription drug ingredients, rare earth minerals. But we've got to get going to make sure they're made somewhere in North America or someone by our allies, not by communist China. It's a long road. It's going to be bumpy, but at least we're in somewhat the right direction.
Steve Laffey, enjoy your Caribbean cruise. I always appreciate your finding time to sit and talk to us, no matter where you are in the world.